The following episode of the Comics and Crypto podcast is for informational purposes only, and anything expressed by the hosts or their guests is solely their opinion. This podcast does not constitute financial advice, and anyone wishing to invest should seek their own independent financial or professional help. Have fun and enjoy the show.
Hi, I'm Sean O'Hare, and I know comics.
Hi, I'm Spencer Vogel, and I know crypto.
Hi, I'm Kevin Lee Loader, and I don't know shit. This is the Comics and Crypto podcast.
Comics and crypto, crypto and comics, collectors world in a digital age. Comics and crypto, crypto and comics, it's where the next billionaires will be rich. Comics and crypto.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us for the first installation of our series with the legendary Alfred Kahn. In this series, we'll be discussing Al's views on digital collectibles and his incredibly successful career, which includes bringing to market some of the most popular franchises in history, such as Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Nintendo, and Cabbage Patch Kids. Please welcome Alfred Kahn.
Al, hey!
Hey. You're blocking the sign. I can't see the sign.
There it is.
Hey, oh, Comics and Crypto. Gotta make sure I'm in the right place, you know?
Green screen's doing a little too good of a job.
Yeah.
Too much of a good green screen.
It's pretty good. Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah. So for everyone out there, we're going to be doing a series with Al, and we're going to be discussing the collectible space, the physical and digital collectible space in Web3. So really excited to have you here, Al. And it was great meeting you at New York Comic Con, where we were able to kickstart all of this.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it as well. It's a fascinating time. You know, it's really a fascinating time. And like anything else, a little bit like the Wild Wild West, you know, especially, you know, it's a brand new situation, and it requires a lot of, you know, different skill sets to figure out what the right thing is to do. And I think it's going to be constantly evolving for quite a while, and probably never stop evolving.
Yeah, 100%. And so for our viewers who don't know about your amazing accomplishments, maybe you can give a little bit of background about yourself.
What are you talking about? No. I'm sorry. I'm just, you know, I'm going to have some fun with this. I don't know what I'm saying. You know, obviously, I've been in the branding and kids business and in the branding business for a long time. You know, way longer than I like to admit. And certainly, my skill set, if I have one, was trying to identify opportunities and how to create those opportunities on a larger scale, how to bring those opportunities to a fruition point. So started out, you know, many years ago, working for a toy company called Coleco. And I was reading the Wall Street Journal, and there was an article, a very small article about a artist in Cleveland, Georgia, who was adopting out soft sculpture dolls. The hell is a soft sculpture doll? I didn't even know. But it was interesting that he'd become sort of a local phenomenon in that area, which Cleveland, Georgia, if you know anything about Georgia, it's about 2 hours outside of Atlanta. They eat possums, you know, it's that kind of stuff. You know, really, you know, it's really a you know, interesting kind of environment. But the whole thing is, you know, the whole thing was called Babyland General Hospital, and you got this, you know, little article in the Wall Street Journal. So I thought, you know, something, I want to go down to see it. So I reached out to him with Xavier Roberts, and I went down and saw it, and it was an old infirmary, like an old hospital that he had turned into this Babyland General Hospital. And you walked in there, and there were nurses and doctors. You know, of course, they weren't real. And they would take you on a tour of Babyland General Hospital, and they'd take these soft sculptured babies, and they had put them in different sequences inside the hospital. So they were in school, they were at lunch, they were theoretically doing everything that a real little baby would do or a child would do. And in the middle of this place, there was a cabbage patch, and the heads of the dolls would come out of a cabbage. And at every 20 minutes or 30 minutes, there'd be an announcement, there's a cabbage in labor, and they would come out, they'd pull a cabbage out, pull a baby out of the cabbage, and go, oh, it's a little boy or it's a little girl. I don't know how they told them apart, frankly. I just thought there was nothing there to do it. And they would cut the, theoretically cut the umbilical cord or whatever they cut. And then they would go, this baby is now up for adoption. Obviously, you could, you know, create whichever environment you wanted for it. It did come with a name. And then you had to take an oath And if you'd adopted it, it was $100 in 1982. Okay, that was a pretty expensive price in 1982.
Yeah.
When I looked at it, I saw that everybody that was in there was transfixed by the experience, and that was a lesson that today is actually apropos. It's everything's exponential. Everything's got to be an experience, and this experience was, the fact that they were really, they felt adopting something that was one of a kind, another interesting, parallel to what's happening today, and that B, it was theirs. It was theirs. They got a birth certificate, they got adoption papers, and they had to take an oath. I promised to be a good parent to my Cabbage Patch Kid. That kind of. And I looked at it, I was, holy mackerel, and the first thing that hit me was, how do you get this to the mass market? Because at that time, no internet, no, how do you do it? There's only really television, a newspaper advertising, things like that. But I really thought the idea was crazy. I mean, it was just a crazy idea. And obviously people were mesmerized by it. And I also like to always think that when you find something that is interesting, the fact that it's viable someplace is, I think, critical. If it's not viable, then you're running the risk of taking something that they don't even like, regardless of whether or not it's viable. So the idea of viability, which I'm a firm believer in everything we do, understand that there's a certain nuance about it that has worked. So made a deal with him and created, tried to figure out a way how to make this thing, into the mass market. And that was a real challenge because everybody thought we were crazy, which is, again, another parallel. Everything we got a parallel. You're out of your mind. I remember when we had to figure out, first of all, how to make one of a kind babies, which was, holy mackerel, in China, which meant you had to have an assembly line that changed every second. You had to have a myriad of heads and, a different color skin and different outfits and everything else popping into that line, so as that you get really one of a kind. Just what he did. The first one of history. And matter of fact, I don't think there's still a actual mass market product that you could say is one of a kind, theoretically, right? So anyway, we went through that painful exercise to determine, how the hell that's going to happen. And then the idea was, what's it going to be called? Well, as soon as I walked into that place and I saw that Cabbage Patch, I said, it's Cabbage Patch Kids. That's what it's got to be. That's for cabbage, right? And you ask yourself, what the heck made it come from a cabbage, right? Well, in Georgia, there's a birth law that every baby comes from a cabbage. It's a state law. It's in Georgia. And so it was obviously the name was Cabbage Patch Kids. And then how do you get this thing out to the rest of the world? I decided to do at that time, Reverend Sun Myung Moon. Remember him? You wouldn't remember anything. You weren't even born. There was a South Korean minister who was doing these mass weddings all over the country. He would bring in hundreds of people into a park and then he'd marry them. And I went, that's it. We're going to do that. So we did a mass adoption ceremony and we invited schools to bring their kids to a park. And then we gave them each a Cabbage Patch Kid, and we asked them to take the oath of being a good parent, and that got a lot of press. You're like, what is this thing? It's crazy. Then, what else could you possibly do? I decided to go. I was going around the country trying to sell this thing, and I'd carry it like it was my baby. I had it in a swathing cloth. If I went into a restaurant, I'd put it on the table. Those little things that hook under the table look like a little high chair. I had him in one of those. I'd order him a meal. People looked at me like I was totally off my off my rocker. But I wanted to get the impression that these things were really your child, your baby. I also felt right away that the target audience was probably adults, because again, you think about people who are empty nesters. Then you think about collectors, and wow, did we have collectors? We had one couple that collected 58,000 Cabbage Patches.
My God.
Wow.
So there's a documentary coming out that I shot about Cabbage Patch that talks about these collectors who are today insane, because today they're still collecting Cabbage Patch Kids. So again, another parallel, right, to what ultimately when you get to what I'm trying to do is tell you guys that my whole life and everything I've done leads up to where we are now. It's actually the same exact place, except with different audiences, certainly. But the idea is the same. So, what do you do next? How do you get? So we had this all kinds of interesting events. Then I decided we'd go to Macy's in Herald Square, which was I think it was in June, and we told the buyer we want all the windows on 42nd Street. We built Babyland General Hospital in all those windows, and with a sign: if you want to adopt your Cabbage Patch Kid, go to the 5th floor. The buyer said, "Am I going to run television ads?" And I said, "Oh, well, I ran a ton of television ads. Okay. You couldn't go on a television station and not see a Cabbage Patch Kid. And, I'm one of a kind. I'm a Cabbage Patch Kid. There's nobody else like me. And it was like we ran this thing till the cows came home. And also at that time, what stores were doing, they run ads in the New York Times on Sunday, and it was actually a phone-in ad. You just actually look at the ad, and unlike today where you can just put it on the internet, you would call into an operator and place an order. So the idea was run this television a number of days prior to the ad dropping, and then open up Babyland General in Macy's and hope that somebody calls the line, right? Well, that was, we sent them about 500 babies, which was a lot. I mean, and also another thing, the price. At that time, a traditional toy baby doll was $9.99 retail. Cabbage Patch Kids were $18.50 wholesale. Everybody thought we were crazy. I mean, when I went to Toys R Us, they thought I was absolutely out of my proverbial mind. He said, "You mean to tell me if we think that blonde, blue-eyed dolls are selling better, we can't reorder them?" I said, "Right. They come in an assortment because they're all one of a kind." And you want people to rummage through the shelves looking for the one that's more like them. I go, could be, or it could be like their sister, it could be like their mother. Yeah, of course. You're crazy. You're absolutely nuts. We're not going to buy it. Well, of course, they bought everything, but it became a struggle because one of the guys who ran Toys R Us hated it so much that ultimately it got him fired because he was so close about it. And the more successful it got, the more angry he got. He just got furious, especially at me. And so one day we were in the Coleco showroom for Christmas. Probably this is the second or third year of Cabbage Patch. He's in a wheelchair because he hurt his knee and he has a cane. And he proceeds to knock over the entire Cabbage Patch this morning. Wow. He was thrown out of the showroom and he was fired by Toys R Us. No, that was crazy. But when I remember one day I got a call. There's so many stories about Cabbage Patch that are funny. I got a call in the office that there was a problem. That occasionally two of them came off the line that were alike. And I said, "Twins, push them into a twins box." We sold a slew of twins, But so the morning of that came so the ads ran for like 6 days. That Sunday morning, the ad broke in the Times. Monday morning, the store opened, and Monday morning I get a call from the buyer. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. This is bad. It's too early. The store is not even open yet. And he goes, "Now we got a real problem." I go, "Well, is it your problem or my problem?" He says, "Well, it's your problem, but it's a good problem. We had 1,500 rain checks on the phone lines yesterday, over and above the inventory we had in stock. And this morning when the store opened up, we cleaned out the 500 kids in about a half hour." And I went, "Oh, we're off. It looks like we're off to the races." So that started a 3-year journey, which we sold $3 billion worth of Cabbage Patch Kids in 1983 dollars. And the stories are just numerous. I guess my favorites, there's so many stories. There were so many people that would call us looking for babies, friends you never knew you had, right? Those kind of stories. "Hey, tell Al it's Jim." Yeah, Jim who? He'll know. But a lot of these stories were parents calling us, and my son's got brain cancer. All he wants is a Cabbage Patch Kid. My daughter's got leukemia. Well, I said to our staff, I said, "Look, if anybody calls me with that, get their address, send them a kid. I'm not going to vet these people, And awesome. I remember one day, my secretary said, Nancy Reagan's on the line from the White House. And I said, "That's really original." That's a good one, but I'm not taking that call either, And then at the end of the day, I'm going through the messages, and there was a message that was a Washington, D.C. number. It said Nancy Reagan had called. I go, this really couldn't be, but, maybe it is. I called her. Of course it was. And she needed 2 Cabbage Patch Kids because they brought in a couple of kids from Korea for heart operations, and they wanted to send them back with Cabbage, and she couldn't get them. She didn't know where to get them. I said, okay, look, I'll make you a deal. I will, send you the Cabbage Patch Kids. I want to meet your husband. It was Ronald Reagan, right? And I was still 30 years old. This is like how crazy this was. And she says, deal. And then 2 weeks later, I get an invitation to the White House. We started a whole other program of stuff for Cabbage Patch Kids in Space, the space program. It was crazy. So that was a crazy story. In between that, I did a lot of other things, a lot of projects, a lot of toys, a lot of things for Coleco. We did handheld games, we did ColecoVision, we did all that stuff. We brought in Donkey Kong from Nintendo, to sell that around the world. And then, after I left Coleco, I was working outside my own company called 4Kids Entertainment. And one of the things I had noticed was the video games were starting to pop up. And not so much the consoles, but the arcade games, right? They were starting to come everywhere. So I decided to go to Japan and look around and see what was going on there. And that started an odyssey where I went to Japan 40 straight years. So I know something about Japan, I can tell you, but for the trips I went, I saw that these arcade games were really popular in Japan. And then obviously eventually you're going to see home versions of them, etc. And I found out one of the companies that made them, and I went to talk to them in Kyoto, and I asked them, who represents you outside of Japan? They go, no one. I said, I'll do it. And they had known me from Coleco, so it's not like I didn't know me completely. And they agreed, and I got worldwide merchandising rights from Nintendo. And I brought them in to the rest of the world. And I represented them for probably 25 years. In that time frame, around 1992, I saw a game being played in the streets of Tokyo called Pocket Monsters. And it was obviously a card game, and it was also a game played on the on Game Boy, but it was not the game you saw on Game Boy recently. It was what they call a role-playing game. You had to read while you played. So it was really popular. So I went to Nintendo and said, look, I want to bring this out to the rest of the world. They go, no chance. American kids don't read. It's going to be a complete bomb. I don't know. They had a television show. They had all kinds of stuff. So it took me about a year to get the rights, and it cost me a lot of money. And that was another whole story. Nintendo said, look, this is going to bomb. So I want you to bring it out under 4Kids Entertainment, because with bombs, we want you to take the fall. We don't want anybody to know we have anything to do with this thing, other than we're a licensee. And they're the owners. They're the owners. And they said, we'll bring in and I said, okay, first of all, we got to change the name. I suggested we change the name to Pokemon, because it was alliteration to some extent, but also it sounded Japanese. I thought Pocket Monster sounded like it came out of Brooklyn, So that was another struggle. I mean, because no one had seen anime before, right? No one had seen anime. So here I am going to the broadcasters trying to show them a television show that is anime, which is not traditional animation. They've never seen it before. Now today, again, fast forward, number one most popular animation is anime. Yeah. So it's like, whoa, okay. So I couldn't get it cleared. I went there. There wasn't that many stations. There was Fox. There was NBC, CBS, ABC. And I remember Haim Saban, you probably heard that name, who's made a fortune on Ninja Turtles. On Power Rangers, and bought Fox station. And he told me, if he gives me for free, I wouldn't run that piece of shit. I said, okay, I guess you're not going to take it. And then we had to figure out a way how to get it on the air. We syndicated it, which today you really can't syndicate. We put it on in 200 stations at 5 o'clock in the morning. So you figure everybody's going to watch it is going to be like, night watchmen, people who are, really getting up early for work. There'll be no kids, they're not going to get up. How to promote it? How do I promote it? So I got this idea of sending out VHS tapes. Again, there were no CDs, there were no, internet. And I bought Nintendo's mailing list, and I bought Toys R Us's mailing list. We created a fake DVD because we had no footage yet from the show. So we renamed the characters, right? So the character and we named the kid we call him Ash Ketchum, whatever that name came from. So with this, the video was about his aunt saying that all Ash does is stay in the basement playing Pokemon. Doesn't come out ever. And we did a whole story about what the game was about without really physically having any footage. We had certainly cards. We had certainly, things of that ilk. And we sent 1 million tapes out. That was a lot of money, 1 million tapes in 1992. And, the kids started watching the show. We got calls from the station saying that it's like the kids are getting up and watching it. It's doing better at 5 o'clock in the morning than our shows do at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I went, oh, okay, maybe this is something. And then, and make a long story short, then we shipped in the card game, your license, which is the coast of the card game, and they started shipping that. Blew out. We licensed Hasbro for the toys, but Hasbro, didn't believe in it. So I said to them, look, the toys are all in China. They're all made. I'll give you a 1-year license that, without a guarantee. Well, we have to pay a royalty. But at the end of that time, if you wanted to renew it, you had to renew it on my dime. And it was, of course, they wanted to renew it 20 minutes after they got it. Mm-hmm. And it was a staggering amount of money. And the whole thing just blew up. And of course, on the tail end of that, I saw another card game that I wanted, which actually was a better card game. And actually, we sold more cards than Pokemon, which was Yu-Gi-Oh!
That was my game growing up. Loved Yu-Gi-Oh!
Right. And the problem is, how do I get Nintendo to let me do Yu-Gi-Oh? Because they're the card games, right? They're competitors. Well, I thought about it and I said, where these card games really get settled in is that they have tournaments, right? They have tournaments in different card stores and kids play against each other. I said, if I'm controlling both of them, I can make sure they don't step on each other. I can make sure that the day that you have a Pokemon tournament in City X, you won't have a Yu-Gi-Oh tournament or vice versa.
True.
And also, I thought Yu-Gi-Oh was a little bit better too than Pokemon was. Make a long story short, we ended up with a incredible success in Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon, and of course, in that process, we did a myriad of other things. I remember Thundercats. We did Thundercats. Remember Polly Pocket. We did Polly Pocket. There's a whole bunch. Matter of fact, I think if you look at the record, probably of the top 10 or 12 most successful toy brands in history, we probably have 6 or 7 of them. So
wow.
And we're doing more now. We have more coming out now. We have new lines coming out that, I think one of them is really possibly could be very, very good. And if it is, it'll become an NFT faster than the speeding poet. but it's coming out in January. And so that's really a nutshell. But again, I represented Microsoft. I represented Nintendo. I represented, a lot of brands when they asked me to help them brand. And that was really what I did, and still do it.
That is just an incredible journey. Yeah.
Wow.
So I guess off of that, my question would be, of all those, really, really incredible IPs that you got to work with, which of those are you most proud of and why?
Well, you could argue, any one of them because they were so successful. And I think the interesting caveat is that people, especially people that are a little bit older than you, who grew up on this stuff. So they have a very vested interest in it. So I think that you have to argue that Pokemon and Cabbage Patch Kids were pretty good. But by the same token, there were a lot of other ones we did that were really good, that weren't necessarily as large because they weren't built to be that large, Quiz Whiz, and things of that ilk. So I think every one of them, I'm proud of. I think the most difficult one was Cabbage Patch Kids. I think that one was real difficult to get off the box because we didn't have any partners. We didn't have. And I remember I wanted to create a promotional idea. I wanted to get an artist to draw some portraits of Cabbage Patch Kids, like, a pop artist. I looked around, I saw this guy who's not really popular yet, but he was actually, I thought he could be popular. So I hired him to paint 6 portraits of Cabbage Patch Kids. Who was he? Andy Warhol. So, and
Wow.
that was, in those days, he was just, he wasn't that big a deal. And those things are worth a fortune. Of course, I gave them away a long time ago. Who knew? I don't even have any Pokemon cards. That's how stupid I am. So, and I may have them somewhere, but I don't even know where they are. But I think, all of them have, even some of the failures I thought were, great ideas. And I'll tell you the secret about why would a great idea fail? If even going through all the testing we do, what would be the reason why that would fail? And I'll tell you, because it works exactly today. The biggest reason why anything fails is timing. Of course, assuming it's a good idea, assuming that you've vetted it to some extent, so you know that people like it, but timing. When is the universe ready for it? Now with NFTs, when David first showed it to me, I don't think the universe was ready for it. You follow? But the universe had to evolve. The internet had to evolve. There had to be a huge network of phones, right? Because I remember I developed the first kid's cell phone, but I did it on a Wi-Fi network, thinking that kids will always have Wi-Fi near them. So they all wanted their own phone. So I developed a Wi-Fi phone. Couldn't give it away. No, everybody thought, no. Even though the kids couldn't get a cell phone because it was too expensive. No one wanted to screw around with, AT&T and, anything like that. So there's some ideas that I really thought were great, and that turned into, poop. But other ideas that I believe in everything I do, sometimes at my detriment. Sometimes you don't know when to fold them. You keep on pushing them. But that's really. So I really don't have there's a favorite, but I do have a feeling for a lot of them because they were all, I think, pretty good ideas.
You fought hard for them. Cabbage Patch Kids, Pokemon. It's really incredible.
Well, what goes to the issue, never stop looking, because you never know. Because, if you think you have all the answers, you certainly don't. I don't care who you are. But yet there's so much creativity around the world. You go look for it. So I spent, when I left 4 kids, when I sold it, I went around the world looking for stuff. I found a slew of stuff, and I signed about 12 or 14 different things. And now they're all in different stages of disarray. You follow? But the first one is coming out this January, and there's a schedule for the other ones to start coming out as we get to them. But they're all, in my mind, they're all pretty interesting, and they take advantage. Of course, some of them with new technology that has just been evolved, and some of them have just great play patterns, and which I think parents will really like. And it also looks at where the market is today in terms of toys, and where the market is today in terms of what people are looking to buy for their children. I think we identified some sweet spots, that we think are going to be good: health and wellness, helping kids to get smarter. Sounds pedantic, but these are very cool ideas that actually do that. So anyway.
So how did you get involved with VEVE? How did that come about?
Well, when I was doing Pokemon, I needed card distributors in every country. And I knew no one in New Zealand or Australia. Zero. I had an agent. I had an agent in Australia. And he said to me, I got this guy who owns some card shops in, I guess they were in Australia and New Zealand. And his name is David Yu. And he said, he'd be interested in distributing, Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh cards. So I guess my agent made the deal. I don't even know. I never met David. I didn't know anything about him. I didn't know how old he was. I knew nothing. And he became the agent, or the licensee. He still is, just now, for Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh. So he made his first 2 Ferraris, his first apartment building, selling Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh. And I didn't realize that when I licensed him, he was 17 years old. So I guess what happened was David was tracking me down, and we ran into each other by accident somewhere. I don't remember where it was. It could have been Hong Kong. It could have been, it wasn't Hong Kong. I was at the Hong Kong toy show, and he was running around there too. And he wanted to, said, I got something I gotta show you. And I said, okay, look, we're gonna go to Vegas for the licensing show. Why don't you meet there? And you show it to us. So he and Dan were in Vegas at the licensing show, and he, proceeded to show me what they were thinking about, which was, a digital collectible universe. There was no concept of NFTs at that point in time, and it was basically that he needed somebody to help him brand it, and he needed somebody to get him licenses because no one knew him, and he wouldn't. It was and the idea was so new that it would require somebody that people would know to get into the door to even explain it. So I looked at it and I went, it's not crazy. I mean, if everything else, you think about everything else at that time had gone digital anyway. Your records had gone digital. A lot of different activities had gone digital. And when he told me he was going to use the phone, the cellular phones, I thought that was a really interesting thought because there were so many of them that were now entrenched. And think about the biggest companies that have started on an Apple or Android phone, or Uber, and all the food services and everything else you can think of. So, so we negotiated a deal, and then I spent years with him, schlepping him into every studio in California, and basically talking to the presidents of all these companies to try and get them to see what we were going to do. Because every time you brought that in, you had 22 lawyers sitting in the room. How do we license this thing? What are we licensing? And of course, it's gotten more complicated since that. What turned out, what started as a very easy, theoretically an easy license, turned into a really compendium because of the insert of the cryptocurrency. That became a real, good news, bad news type of thing in terms of how do you integrate that to what's going on, and how do you protect yourselves, and how do you migrate that, and all the other stuff that goes along with it. So the business has gotten much more complicated, and it's not simple. And that crypto is is challenging in so many ways because you got governmental issues, you've got all kinds of issues which are becoming more and more trying to figure out how to regulate them, how to create a environment where everybody no one gets totally burned on this thing, which of course a lot of people have been, because you're buying something that has really no backup, no real backup. I'm not suggesting, I think Omi's got a backup, but I'm talking about, like what's a Bitcoin got? Bitcoin's only got the belief that it's worth something. That's all it's got. Of course, the more you spend it and the more that you use it, then the more that belief system sort of kicks in. But when you think about it, that was when it started out. At one high, the high it was I don't even know, but today it's like 17,000. So it's like still a big number, but compared to what the number was, a year ago, it's really diminished relative to that. So, but again, this is a link in a chain. Everything that we're talking about has elements that have been used in things going forward, whether it be the same exact product, but it certainly, certainly relates. It's the history of this stuff. I'll get another example, which no one knows. And I started to work on the kids business. I was certainly interested in Marvel, and I tried to buy Marvel actually from the family who owned it before it was bought by Ike Perlmutter. And there was a family that owned Marvel. And I came up with some really cool toy ideas. But they were all one-of-a-kind toys. They were all one-of-a-kind toys. How to make a one-of-a-kind action figure. And I'm thinking, we can do it. But I remember that Marvel, I always wondered, everything's got to be derivative at some point. I wondered, where did they get the idea for Spider-Man? Where did they get the idea for Batman? Where did they get the idea for Superman? So I went back to the pulp novels. You know what the pulp novels are? Okay, they were written in the 30s. 4 comic books. Okay? And they were published by one of the big companies, a pulp company called Street and Smith, that published, not only did they publish these pulp novels, but they published also like baseball books and stuff like that. And the reason why I knew them, they were owned by a company called Condé Nast, which is a big magazine company, and I represented them for years. So they said, what do you want to do with this stuff? And I started looking at it. Well, guess what I found? Inside that, again, there was no copyright protection, right? I found a pulp novel called The Bat. Ooh, guess what that was? A guy got bitten by a bat and turned into a bat. And I found another one called The Spider. Oh, guess what that was? Same story. Another guy got bitten by a spider and turned into a spider. But the most egregious one I found was Doc Savage. You've ever heard of Doc Savage? Doc Savage is the Man of Steel. Way before the Man of Doc Savage is the Man of Bronze. Way before the Man of Steel. And where did Doc Savage live? In the Fortress of Solitude. So that was totally ripped off.
Oh, wow.
There was no copyright. There was nothing. So there's no recourse. But that's exactly what happened there. No one has got to really. They may have new ideas or new ways to do it, but somebody had to start it somewhere.
We've heard so many amazing stories today, Al. It's been quite amazing first 20 minutes. And I was curious, throughout your career, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Cash out when you're really doing well. Don't think you're going to go on forever. Don't think that the best is yet to come. If you're doing really well, get out. And maybe it could be too early, but at least you're getting out. And I think that's a good piece of advice. I mean, you never know in these businesses what can happen. I'm not suggesting anything in regard to the business we're in currently, but it's a good idea. Always take some chips off the table.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Especially when you're at a point where you're just playing with house money,
Yeah.
Exactly right. You're playing with house money. Matter of fact, here you go. I got a call. Guess who it's from? You won't believe it. It's not this. This hasn't been planned. David.
Is it David?
No.
Hi, David.
No.
Hey, David.
Say Comics and Crypto says hi.
So, I'm not gonna even answer it. So the bottom line story is that my advice, because I got burned really badly, and not because of anything I could have helped, but just the idea that you never know the circumstances beyond your control sometimes. So that would be really a critical piece of advice. You're doing really well, sell some of it, sell all of it, depending on how you feel. And the idea is having your own real collection, as opposed to being just on a phone or a computer. It's really in a room. Now, it's not really, but it looks like it's in a room, right? And to me, that would be so cool. I mean, that would be so cool.